starting with Black Bay?
Yeah.
Okay. First, we're going to start with the Black Bay Management Plan presentation, and then move into what we think is super exciting on Lake Superior, is the Cisco boom and corresponding predator response.
Yeah. Thank you. So I'm Fritz Fisher. I am the Fisheries Assessment Supervisor for the Upper Great Lakes Management Unit, Ministry of Natural Resources in Ontario. Hi, Christina. Based out of Thunder Bay. So I am going to first talk about the sort of an update on the Black Bay, Black Sturgeon River. We haven't had a talk about this since before the pandemic, and this is a topic that was of great interest to the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission and a lot of people sitting here when it was going on. So this is the update. So in terms of some history, and I'll just quickly go back here. Obviously, that red circle is around Black Bay. So it is nestled between Thunder Bay to the west and Nipigon Bay to the right. So in terms of some history and some background here, Black Bay covers 65,000 hectares. It has a maximum depth of 68 meters. The north end of the bay, which is really sort of delineated by that red line on the map, is relatively shallow and productive. That red line is the current regulatory boundary. So north of that line is closed to recreational angling, as is the Black Sturgeon River at the north end of that diagram. And in 1959, 1960, a dam was constructed at Camp 43 location, 17 kilometers up from the mouth of the river, to assist with log driving, which is obviously not something that currently goes on there. In terms of walleye, historically, Black Bay was home to the largest commercial walleye fishing. It was the most important commercial walleye fishery on Lake Superior. The Black Sturgeon River is the main spawning tributary for those walleye, and the walleye population crashed in 1960, and that was attributed to the dam being constructed, and then also to commercial fishing. So a little bit about the dam. It was constructed, like I said, it was constructed in 1959, 1960, blocks all fish passage 17 kilometers up from the mouth. Kathy Sakamoto did a master's thesis back in 2007 modeling walleye spawning habitat and found that 80% of the available walleye spawning habitat was actually above the Camp 43 barrier, so inaccessible to walleye currently. The dam blocks both native and non-native species. The dam was not in compliance with the Ontario Dam Safety Guidelines, and it was a very, very, very polarizing structure. So it really broke down to sort of people who were scared about lamprey, which is anybody who doesn't live, let's say, right around Black Bay, and then people who live in the area and really wanted walleye restoration to happen and thought that the dam needed to be removed in order for that to happen. So this was decades, really decades of back and forth on this. It included a structured decision-making meeting and lots and lots of work. So here's a timeline that is probably difficult to read many aspects of it, but really the most important parts are those last two boxes. So in 2020, an engineering team from the Ministry of Natural Resources went out and looked at the dam, and the three separate sections were all at risk of failing. So a decision was made at that time. There had been an environmental studies report done that had been completed around that time as well that recommended that the dam be repaired in its current location. And the risks associated with the dam failing were deemed to be too high, and the dam was repaired. So millions of dollars have been spent repairing the dam, and it's not going anywhere. we had made a commitment to the Fisheries Management Zone 9 Council years before that, that when a decision was finally made about the dam, that we would then implement a Black Bay Fisheries Management planning process. So in 2023, a team was formed, and we've had a lot of meetings. It's been a pretty quick process, and we've been working on trying to produce a fisheries management plan for Black Bay, and it's in draft right now. That's where we're at with that. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to do some history here, and then some of our telemetry work, and then some of the other surveys that we do, and give you a picture of what's going on and where things are at with walleye and what's happened. So lots of you have seen this figure probably multiple times, but this is the history of walleye in Black Bay. So those red vertical bars that you see there are the walleye harvest for about 2 decades. So for 2 decades, that red horizontal arrow indicates the maximum sustainable harvest, and you can see that those red bars were all vastly exceeding that, especially towards the end. The green line is the walleye effort, the fishing effort for walleye. So the dam was built in 1959, 1960, and then in 1968, the commercial fishing harvest peaked, I think 115,000 kilograms, and then very shortly after that, walleye became incredibly hard to catch, and the fishery pretty much closed itself. Once the walleye fishery closed, a new perch fishery opened using smaller mesh gill nets, and that perch fishery caught a lot of small, well, what were being called at that time sauger. We've never seen a sauger in any of our surveys in Black Bay, so presumably those were small walleye. So that perch fishery was then closed in 2003. So we really needed to figure out what walleye do in Black Bay and the Black Sturgeon River. There have been, I arrived at the unit in 2012, and when I got there, it was apparent to me that there, like a lot of what was being used to make these decisions were studies that had some weaknesses. So in 2016, we implemented a pretty ambitious telemetry program on Black Bay. In the course of this study, which involved many different, well, every year we rejigged our receiver array to answer different questions. We tagged a total of 233 walleye during that time. There's still walleye swimming around with V16 tags in them right now, pinging on some of our receivers. You saw the receiver array in Eric's previous presentation. We have receivers all over the North Shore now. And of course, all these data go to GLaDOS. So I'm just going to give a few high points from our telemetry work. So when I arrived, definitely, when I arrived at the unit, the walleye population in Black Bay was described as being one that spawned almost entirely in the Black Sturgeon River, which obviously has implications if you're thinking about keeping a dam there that might be preventing them from getting to their spawning habitat. So we really needed to find out how badly this dam was preventing walleye from reaching their natal grounds, and also how many of those walleye were actually using the river to spawn. So this is a figure from a heat map from the spawning period in 2019, and we had various different receiver configurations that showed the same thing. But the real important takeaways here are that only about 60% of the population goes into the river to spawn. There's a huge concentration of fish in the northwest corner of the bay, where there had been presumed shoal spawning reported way back in the past. We did put egg mats down in that area and didn't get any eggs, but they're hanging out there. A large portion of the population is hanging out there during the spawn in the northwest corner and not going into the river. And the other really critical part of this is that the walleye that go into the river almost all stop quite far away from the dam and spawn. So these fish are not nosing up against the dam, hoping to go past it. There are a number of rapids on the way in that 17-kilometer stretch up to the dam. thousands of fish still end up at the dam, so you can see why people in the past would look at what was going on at the dam. They see maybe 10,000 walleye there, and they say, this is obviously all the walleye in Black Bay, but, you know, there are over 100,000 walleye in Black Bay. Some portion of them are at the dam, but most of them are not. Once spawning's over, they move southward in the bay. Interesting. The slides are advancing here, but not here.
We want you to reinterpret that, Chris.
Okay, let's talk about it again.
I'm good. I have that.
All right, can you go forward to where he's at? That is not matching what we have. That is not matching what we have. All right, and try going forward one. All right.
Okay. So we also found really remarkably consistent dispersal patterns year over year in Black Bay as well. So that 76 that you see there, that's the regulatory boundary. So 76, and then in the subsequent year, 87% of the walleye cross that regulatory boundary. So these fish are not fully protected in the bay. They are being subjected to angling pressure once they cross that line. And we also found that, again, quite consistently, between 27 and 30% of the walleye leave Black Bay entirely in the summer through the fall. So that had implications for us because we do our fall walleye index netting and now our broad scale management netting surveys during the time that about a third of the population is gone. Interestingly, only one of the walleye that left Black Bay has been detected in Nipigon Bay, but lots of them go around Silver Islet here and into Thunder Bay. So that's the subsequent year, and you can see amazing agreement between those numbers. So this figure is a little bit difficult to see exactly what's going on, but what we have here are the number of unique tags detected at the receivers as you ascend the Black Sturgeon River. So that top graph, and this is time. So the top graph here is the receiver that's a few hundred meters downstream of the dam. The bottom graph is the receiver at the mouth of the river, and these are receivers as you ascend the river. So you can see that, of course, every fish that enters the Black Sturgeon River is picked up on the mouth receiver. This is the spawning period delineated with the red box. So as you go upstream, you see diminishing numbers of tags. And then the top, you see what happens at the dam, which is that very few fish are getting there. There was also a fair amount of disagreement about the role that high falls might play in this. So high falls is not a high falls, it's a small falls, but it's a falls about 1 kilometer up from Camp 43 Dam. So there were well-founded concerns that we might remove the dam and then give walleye access to about 1 kilometer of habitat, additional habitat, and then find out that lamprey are able to go up above the high falls, and so they would have unfettered access to the rest of this drainage. And talking to Rob McLaughlin about this way back, he said, well, one thing about them is that neither of them can jump, but lamprey are more tenacious. Like, walleye are pretty lazy. They find a place that looks good to spawn, they spawn there, and that's great. But lamprey will keep going, they're sucking under rocks, they're moving themselves upriver. So we had a research scientist in our outfit, Bob Metcalf, did some flow modeling work, and here's what he found, which is that there's like a soft spot on the inside where those fish, like obviously red is like a no-go for walleye, yellow is difficult, green is good. So these fish could potentially be hugging the shore and coming up and then squeezing through that little piece of green right on the shore there. But it seems pretty unlikely, and it kind of matched what we were getting from anecdotal reports from anglers who had been there before the dam was in place. So the walleye that got up to High Falls would just bottle up behind High Falls. So it's definitely a selectively permeable membrane for walleye. We also tagged 15 walleye at the early days of this project. We tagged 15 walleye and moved them above the Camp 43 dam to see if any of them would migrate above this. They didn't. Sturgeon that were tagged, some of them did go past there. So our critical telemetry findings, I've already outlined them, but the migration happens, so 25 to 30% of that population is gone when we're doing our surveys. The fish are concentrated at the north end of the bay, and then during the spawn, and then they move south during the summer. Not everyone spawns in the Black Sturgeon River, so only 50 to 60% of those individuals run the Black Sturgeon in the spawn, and only 2 to 7% during our entire multi-year study, only 2 to 7% of those tagged fish will hit the dam and could potentially pass if it had been removed. And the northwest corner is a hot spot, and we assume that it must be shoal spawning there. So now I'll get into some figures that were contributed to heavily by Enrique Giacomini, who's a research scientist with the MNR, so thanks to Enrique. So here are the results from so the beginning of the black dots are a fall walleye index netting survey, and then we implemented the broad scale management netting protocol for the last few surveys, which has been, there's been calibration work done so that you can link these two data sets together, so that's what you're seeing here. We implemented it because that's the survey that's done in all the inland lakes in Ontario. It's the Ontario standard now. It's done on other Great Lakes as well. So, so you can see what happened here was that, so the first survey that we did was in 2002, which was before the closure of the perch fishery. I believe in that survey there were 16 walleye caught in all of Black Bay. So that's that first value. You see, by 2008, the population had increased dramatically, and since that point, it's sort of like yo-yoed up and down, and seems to have hit some sort of plateau. So Enrique located those red dots are Black Bay surveys, our BSM surveys for Black Bay. The gray shotgun here is lakes from northwestern Ontario where broad scale management surveys have been done. You have to remember as well that these are some of the best walleye lakes in the province for sure. So it's more in the mix of these lakes than I had anticipated when he was going to do this work. The blue dots that you see are Lake Huron walleye fisheries. So most of them are actually, or lots of them are in worse shape than Black Bay. And the orange dots are other Lake Superior locations, which are also in worse shape. It should be noted that the only location on this entire scatter plot with a closed fishery are those red dots. Nothing else is closed. Here are the age distribution values through time. So the 2002 surveys at the bottom, you can see that there were no old fish, all young fish, and that the age distribution on the top looks great. Stretched way out, we have some old fish in there. You can see some bumps from good recruitment events. And here's the mortality figure for what's going on out there, and we are at a mortality level now of about 20%, which is very, from what we can see, seems to be reflective of an unfished natural mortality rate. So there is fishing going on here. There's bycatch in the commercial fishery, and there is recreational fishing going on, and there is an indigenous harvest that goes on in the spring, but you can't see it in the data that we've collected. So another piece of information that kind of indicates what's been going on with walleye out there is some of the steelhead work that we've been doing. So Portage Creek has had a steelhead study going on since the 90s. It's a fishery that's closed to recreational angling, so the fish are not being affected by that. So the study started in 95, the river was closed to recreational angling at the time, and you saw an increase to over 2,000 fish that were running the river in the early 2000s. But then, sort of coincident, around that 2003, you saw an inflection point. So the walleye population was increasing at that time, and you see this decrease in the steelhead population. Our last population estimate for that river is 39 fish. We actually got enough recaps to get a population estimate. It is now 39 individual fish in that river from a high of over 2,000. So there's no smoking gun here, but at the same time, the smolting age of those steelhead have flipped completely. So it used to be dominated by 1-year-old smolts. Now the only fish out there really are 2-year-old smolts. So we assume that there's some sort of size selective pressure going on. It would make sense that that probably is walleye. If every walleye in Black Bay eats 2 smolts a year, that's over 200,000 rainbow smolts that are getting eaten. It's a lot. So now what? We're working on a Black Bay management plan. Like I said, it's in draft. And so it's going to guide responsible management of fishery resources in Black Bay. We've scoped in a whole pile of species. Walleye took most of the largest number of meetings and generated the most conversation, but we're working on all of these species. Some of what we do here will probably have implications for Ontario-wide management of fish, and we will eventually be recommending regulatory changes for the Ontario fishing regulations. And that red line that we were seeing before has been removed. So what we do here will apply to the entirety of the bay. And so with that, I'd like to say thanks. We've had amazing assistance from people in this room and all sorts of others. I'll take questions.